Ray Spitfire here with some Vigor, and today we're here with a very special video, and today we are going to be ranking every single weapon in Vigor from very worst to very best, and I am going to emphasize now that this is only including ranged weapons, so knives will not be included in this list. I'm sorry for all you knife fans. And a few disclaimers before we hop into this. So first of all, each description I'm going to be giving of each weapon is pretty brief and kind of to the point, because if I were to spend too much time on it, the editing process would take far too long. So that's why these are brief. And second off, you might notice throughout this list that I believe I skipped 3 numbers. However, the reason for that was I was under the impression that there were 56 ranged weapons in Vigor, because that's what the wiki told me. However, later, after I recorded the video, I did a recount. Turns out there are 59 ranged weapons in Vigor. So I missed a few, and also because of my inability to count, I also messed up 1 or 2 rankings. However, for like 99% of the time during this video, actually 95% of the time, let's just say during this video, I'm like all the numbers and all that stuff still line up. However, there are like 2 or 3 weapons on here that aren't present. So what I did to compensate for that is typically on each ranking there'll be a weapon icon in the corner, which because then you'll be telling what weapon, you can tell what weapon I'm talking about. However, if there's a weapon I missed, there's going to be a second weapon icon on the same screen, and that just symbolizes that I think that this weapon and this weapon are on equal like power level, basically. So yeah, and I hope that made any sort of coherent sense. Don't worry, you'll pick it up pretty quick. It's pretty self-explanatory. So I apologize in advance if you see me skipping over a number or 2, and if you see some weapons absent. Don't worry, there's only like 3. So like 95% of the weapons in Vigor are still on this list. So yeah, with all being said though, if you guys do enjoying this, please hit the like button, subscribe, go grab some snacks, because this is a very long one. And with all being said, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the video, everybody. Alright, coming in at number 56, we have the crossbow. Do I really have to say anything? It's the crossbow. I'd almost rather melee. It's bad. It has no range, no damage. The only thing that it has going for it is that it's mildly cool and unique. That's it. It's still a terrible weapon, so moving on. Coming at number 55, we have the PM. I mean, it's the PM. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun meme gun. I'll give you that, but it's still a bad gun. I have nothing to say about it. Terrible bloom, no damage, god-awful irons. Nothing to say about PM. Moving on. Coming at number 54, we have the Luger. I literally just take everything I said about the PM and just the spread is slightly less. That is, and it's funnier. I'll say that. The Luger I find more entertaining to shoot than the PM, but that's the only difference. Moving on. Coming at number 52, we have the Silver Pigeon, and some of you might be surprised because this is actually pretty high up in the list, and honestly, looking at it now, yeah, I still don't regret my decision. The Silver Pigeon's a bad gun. It's just bad. Like, apart from the pistols, this gun just sucks. There's nothing to say about it. It has no range, no damage, and it's horribly inconsistent. Like, I mean, yeah, you can technically get one shot with it, but it's so horribly inconsistent that good luck. Just good luck. That's all I'm going to say about it. Moving on. Coming in number 51, and this is quite fitting, it's the IZH. I mean, it's literally the same thing as the Silver Pigeon, except, well, it's not the Silver Pigeon. That's pretty much the only difference. IZH tends to hit a little harder, generally. I put an asterisk next to that. Honestly, you could interchange Silver Pigeon and IZH and it'd be the same. Like, it's almost the exact same gun. So, yeah, moving on. Coming at number 50, we have the Scorpion. Yes, there is absolutely some bias with this one because I recently just did a 2-part mini-series on this thing and it sucked. Like, much more than I originally thought. I knew this weapon wasn't great, but good lord, that series opened my eyes. This thing is completely impractical in basically every single meaningful situation. Like, unless you hit a headshot, you ain't killing squat with this thing. And even if you're shoving the barrel down their throat, if they return fire, you just lose every time, without fail. So that's why it's ranked so low. Moving on. Coming in at number 49, we have the Gal. I mean, it's basically just the Scorpion again. There's nothing more to say, and the Gal does no damage. Its range is definitely a little better than the Scorpion's for sure, and I think that's why it's above it. But it's still wholly impractical. Like, you're gonna lose every gunfight unless you're hitting headshots, which, to be fair, this thing is definitely a headshot machine. I will give you that. But beyond that, it's not a good gun. It just doesn't have it doesn't have the punch. It doesn't have the fire rate. It's just not a good gun. Moving on. Coming in at number 48, we have the Thompson. Thompson is just like, I mean, of course Thompson's this low. It's a Thompson. Like, I don't think I need to explain this too much. I don't think this is too controversial. It's one of the first guns you get. I think it is literally the first gun you get access to. And I mean, it's passable. Like, you can use it and occasionally get a kill, but almost anything is better than a Thompson. Moving on. Coming in number 47, we have the Grease Gun. Grease Gun, a lot of people, I don't know why, but a lot of people kind of like the Grease Gun. I don't understand why. There isn't, at least in my mind, there isn't much to like about it. Slow fire rate, no damage, pretty bad iron sights, and its DPS is abysmal, but it's better than Thompson, so there's that. Moving on. Coming in number 46, we have the sawed-off shotgun, and the irony of a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun being better than the proper double-barrel shotgun is just sad and also really funny at the same time. Seriously, it makes absolutely no sense, but the sawed-off just hits harder. This thing does meaningful damage at point-blank range. At any other distance, it's completely useless. But if you're in their face and you hit your shot, yeah, they're dead. So, that's pretty cool. Moving on. Coming in number 45, we have the VZ58P. Yeah, this gun's, it's bad. It's probably the worst AR in the entire game. I hate this thing with a passion. A lot of you know this. And I will admit there's probably some bias here. But this thing still sucks. You can't hit the broadside of a barn with this thing. Sure, on paper its DPS is pretty good, but it's so horribly inaccurate that, like, it's like a Tommy gun, right? You can hit, you spray and your fire rate's pretty good and the damage is pretty good, but good luck actually hitting anything. Moving on. 44, we have the Mosin. Look, I will swallow my pride on this one, and I will say if you're using a single Mosin and you are a standard, like you're an average player, yeah, the Mosin's just not practical. I'll say it. I will say it. It hurts me to say it, but it's true. One Mosin on its own is just not a great weapon, and ever since they like shadow nerfed the Mosin cycle, it's significantly worse. If I were to rank the cycle on this list, it would probably be a lot higher, but just an individual Mosin is just not that great. I mean, the fire rate's slow, the damage is questionable at best, and most players have no clue how to use it, so that's why it's this low. All right, coming in number 43, we have the Sharf. Sharf is literally just a Mosin with a scope. There's no real difference, and I guess the Sharf has a little bit more bullet velocity, but it's basically just the Mosin with a scope, by and large, and it has the exact same problems as the Mosin. The only reason why it's higher is, like I said, it has a scope, and the bullet velocity is a little bit better and a little more consistent. So, moving on. Coming in number 42, we have the G3 without the scope. I want to emphasize that. G3 without the scope. Yeah, this thing's pretty bad. For a blue AR, this thing is, yeah, this thing's dicey to put it mildly. The only good thing about this is it has good damage, and its bloom is okay. Beyond that, it's pretty bad. It's not good at, like, medium range, which is what a rifle is supposed to be. Its scope is straight up terrible, and it has almost no ammo. You burn through ammo ridiculously fast in this thing. It's only a 20-round clip, so it's just not that viable in most situations. It's better than nothing, but it just doesn't quite have what it needs to be considered a decent gun. Moving on. For 41, we have the KS-23, and this shotgun, I don't know what to think of this shotgun. It has range, and it does decent damage, and it has 4 shells, but its fire rate's slow, and its aforementioned damage is pretty inconsistent. It's It's better than all the other shotguns I've listed so far, but not by much. And that's really the only reason why it's better than the other shotguns I've listed is because it has 4 shells. That is really the only major difference. And I guess the fact that it has a little better range, but I already stated that. So, moving on. Number 40, we have the SKS. And good lord, man. When I went into this review, I honestly thought the SKS would be like 20s or 30s. No, this thing's just even worse than I remember. You get so many... You have to hit 50% of your clip to kill someone with this thing. Assuming you hit them like center mass and not in the face. Obviously, I should have said that with all these weapons. But the SKS is a hit marker machine. Especially if you're operating at longer distances. It's just not viable most of the time. I mean, it's better than nothing, obviously. It's better than a pistol or some SMGs, but in most situations, you're going to get outclassed by pretty much anyone with an AR or a competent SMG. It's just not a good gun. It just does a bad job of being a rifle. That's really its greatest sin. So, moving on. Number 39, we have the Combat Magnum, and good lord, they nerfed the big iron so hard on this. I don't even know why. This thing used to be a consistent pop, pop, 2-tap kill. Now I'm lucky if I can kill him in 3 shots. It's honestly, I don't know why they nerfed it. It still bugs me to this day. This thing used to be able to hit hard, good fire rate, and like, if you hit someone once with this thing, you're probably going to hit them again and they're going to be dead. Nowadays, it's like, if I hit them twice, the bullet feels like it just bounces off them. Like, I love this gun. Like, I love big irons, but this thing is just not viable in most situations. I mean, if you have to have a secondary, sure, but this thing's just not what it used to. And it honestly saddens me on a personal level. Moving on. Coming at number 38, we have the PM63 rack, and honestly, this gun performed pretty admirably, at least in all my experience with it, which is a decent amount. It performed very, very admirably. It was just pretty excellent. For what it is, it's solid. The only reason why it's this low is because, I mean, it doesn't hit very hard. It has no range. But for what it is, which is a secondary machine pistol, I mean, this thing's pretty solid. Like, if you need a secondary, this thing's not a bad pick at all. It's pretty solid. If you're in a pinch, it usually gets the job done. It won't stand a chance against, like, much larger caliber weapons, but it's pretty decent if you're in a pinch. So, moving on. Coming in number 37, and we have the MP7, the only gold weapon so far on this list. MP5K, did I say MP7? Dang it. You know, I'm gonna keep that in. I did not mean to say MP7. Crap. Okay. MP5 it's a bad gun. For a legendary weapon especially, it's really disappointing. Its damage is abysmal, its range is abysmal, its sights are abysmal. The only real redeeming quality about this thing is the fact that it's suppressed, and its fire rate's actually pretty good. Beyond that, though, its accuracy is also pretty average. For a legendary, especially, this thing is just bad. It's just a pea shooter. It feels like you're firing airsoft pellets at people sometimes. It's just not a great gun, and I don't really have much to say about the MP5, so moving on. Coming in number 36, we have the M2 Carbine, and honestly, out of all the things I'm looking at my list right now, I almost regret putting it up this high, because the M2 Carbine is a very respectable gun. Whenever I see someone rocking this thing, I have a lot of respect for him, because the M2 Carbine is a pretty decent gun all around. I mean, it has good fire rate, good damage, good magazine. Its sights are they're okay, I guess, but it's a pretty well-rounded beginner weapon. Like, it can function at close and medium range. I mean, it's not too bad, actually. Like, I have mad respect for this thing, so yeah. As for why it's number 37, I mean, there's just guns that are a lot better. So, moving on. All right, coming in at number 35, we have the PSS, the Pretty Sucky Shooter. For a pistol, I will say this thing hits extraordinarily hard if you hit them center mass, but it's really hard to land your shots with this thing. And this weapon is just a glass cannon, right? If you do manage to sneak up on somebody and you get like 2-3 good hits in, they are probably dead. The problem is you have 6 shots. So if you don't kill them really quickly, which is really hard to do, you are probably going to get absolutely mopped. If they turn around, you're dead. Straight up, you're donezo. Like, this gun is not a brawler. It's purely meant for sneaking up on somebody and trying to take them out before they even know you're there. And you might ask, reasonably, why I put this above the M2 Carbine, and that's mostly just because of its unique way you play with it. And I think, to put it bluntly, I think the way you use the PSS, the way you operate with it, if you know how to do it effectively, it is a very, very competent weapon, but the problem is it does take a little bit. The skill ceiling to get there is a lot higher, but I still think it just about edges out the M2 Carbine, just simply because of its unique gameplay perspective and the fact that if you, like, people will not see this coming. So, moving on. Coming at number 34, we have the PAMD-86, or as I like to call it, the knockoff assault rifle, because, good God, this thing makes me question my sanity. This thing literally looks like you bought it on Craigslist. Like, this thing just looks funky. But looks aside, the gun itself is pretty... It's not terrible. It's competent. But it's just such a weird gun, right? It operates completely different than any other gun I've seen in this game. Not to mention its base stats aren't amazing. However, the one thing that does save this gun a lot of pain is the fact that you can switch between burst, full auto, and single fire. Not a lot of guns can do that. Most guns, it's either 3-round burst or full auto or nothing else. This gun has a really unique angle where you can switch between burst and full auto. Burst is more accurate, full auto is just more DPS. But even with that in mind, it just doesn't pack enough punch. It just doesn't do that much damage. And if you're using burst fire, it just doesn't... You're going to get outgunned by most things. As unique and cool as this gun is on paper, in practicality, it's just not a really viable option. So, moving on. Moving on to number 33, we have the Raffica. And I love the Raffica. This gun is probably one of my personal favorites. Like, just from a design perspective, and a 3-round burst pistol is just kind of a cool concept. However... The big issue with the Raffica is that it's really only good in a very specific circumstance, and that's when you're in a pinch and there's someone right in your face. Now, when you are in that situation, a Raffica is going to shred anybody. It doesn't matter whether it plates or not, it's going to rip right through it. The problem is, it has no variety. You can only use it in that situation, otherwise it's just not practical in any sense of the word. Medium range, useless. Long range, useless. Close range, kind of useless. Point blank range, pretty good. And that's why it's so far down on this list when compared to, because I did this list previously, and this gun has not changed really at all. And I realized that this gun is just not a brawler. It's only good if you really need it and they're really, really close, like if they're breathing down your neck. But in that situation, it is very powerful. Moving on. Moving on to number 32, we have the SWSH, or as I like to call it, the Vigor iron. And, I mean, it's basically just the combat magnum, except it does a bit more damage, and obviously the reload speed's nicer. The only reason why it's higher, like, relatively speaking, compared to its, like, other counterpart, which is almost the same gun, is I feel like this thing does a lot more damage, and it resembles more of the old combat magnum, where it's like, it consistently 2-tap kills. Sometimes you're unlucky and you get 3, but usually you also get a stun with this thing, which really helps. I think that's what really boosts it up. However, it still has the same problems as the combat revolver, and that being, it's not super consistent with damage, and 6 shots is just not that many, even if you can reload lightning quick. So, moving on. Moving on to number 31, and this one's gonna absolutely start a riot in the comment section. And it's the AKM. Oh god, I can already hear the comments already. Okay, so I'm gonna explain myself on this one. So the AKM, let's be real here. It is a vanilla assault rifle. It is perfectly adequate in just about every field. It doesn't necessarily excel at anything, but it's pretty good at everything. That's kind of like what the PA was supposed to be. But real talk here. There are so many better options than the AKM. if you were looking for a cost-effective weapon that's also competent, this thing's perfect. If this list was based on the value of the weapon, like in terms of like bang for your buck, this thing would be way higher. However, we are comparing raw weapon power here. And this thing just doesn't have a lot of it. I mean, sure, its bloom is pretty okay. Its fire rate's solid. Its damage is solid. Its range is even pretty solid, but it's just okay at everything. It doesn't really excel in any situation. Like, if you come across someone with any LMG or a good chunk of ARs or snipers even, the AKM is just outclassed. And that's just an objective fact of it. Sure, it's a competent brawler weapon, but beyond that, it just doesn't really fit any mold. It's just kind of your generic assault rifle that you can bring into encounters with. I respect it immensely, but I can't put it any higher than this because every weapon after this is just inherently better. So, moving on. Coming at number 30, we have the VZ52 rifle. So, some might question the wisdom of putting this above the AKM, and to those people I say, go use the VZ52, because this thing is mean. This thing is what the SKS wanted to be. This thing hits like a truck, it has really good range, its damage is excellent, and its bloom is almost non-existent. This thing is a fantastic rifle, for like especially considering it's only a green rarity too. This thing is very common, the ammunition is very common. It is for what it is a really good rifle. Like, it is basically the AKM of rifles. It's just a fantastic weapon all around. So, moving on. Coming in at number 29, we have the M16, or the ES16 as Vigor calls it. And I have very little to say about the ES16, to be honest. I mean, it's okay. Like, its damage is okay, its range is okay, its fire rate is okay. I put it above the AKM just simply because its range is a little better. And it's it's kind of a laser beam if you do, like, if you have a good angle on someone and they're kind of standing still or like vaguely like moving straight at you, you're probably gonna kill them. This thing is an absolute laser beam in the right circumstance. However, it has a similar feel to the AKM. It's just kind of your generic assault rifle. The only real difference is that it's burst, and that's really the only difference. So I have very little to say about the ES16 if you couldn't tell. So moving on. Coming at number 28, we have the ADR, or the Angry Woodpecker, as I like to call it. And ADR is such a weird weapon for me, because on one hand, it has good fire rate, its scope is really good. The problem is it doesn't do a lot of damage, its range is pretty bad, and it's pretty inconsistent. I think in most close range circumstances, it's a solid weapon to have, and it's a headshot machine for sure if you know how to aim. But it just doesn't have much variety. It's a brawler weapon. Like I said, it completely lacks variety. It's really only good at close range, and even then, there are other guns that do its job a lot better, but still overall a solid option. So, moving on. Coming at number 27, we have the AK-74 KSU, or the Pocket AK, or, you know, Q meme here.
Yo, that's why I say it's got mid-range capability. It's got mid-range capability. Where are you at, Spitfire? Where are you at? Where are you at, Spitfire? That's not the...
And, well, the KSU isn't bad. I'll say that. It's an excellent close-range brawler. It has some mid-range capability. I am stretching put an asterisk next to mid-range capability, because it can work sometimes if the guy who you're shooting at has a gun that kind of sucks. But if you're fighting someone with a sniper or a bugle or any LMG, the KSU is going to get wrecked every time. However, going away from its weaknesses, close range, it's a shredder. No doubt there. I mean, its bloom is pretty tight, its damage is really good, its fire rate is really good. It's excellent close range, but beyond that, it gets pretty dicey, so that's why it's so high up. Moving on. Coming at number 26, we have the AUR Para. Para is actually surprisingly similar to the KSU in terms of its strengths. The only major difference is it substitutes damage and fire rate for more mid-range potential. That's really the only difference, and I like guns that have both mid and short-range potential. And I think it just makes the gun better, because the more like ways you can fight, the more adaptable you are. The more adaptable you are, the more likely you are to win a fight. And I think that's why the Para takes over the AK-74. I mean, you can basically apply the same thing I said about the KSU and just apply it here. Except this thing actually does have competent mid-range capability. Moving on. Coming at number 25, we have the G3 with the scope this time. G3, I have very little to say about G3, to be honest. It's just a pretty solid assault rifle with a scope on it. There's very little to say about it. I mean, it functions at all ranges. It does decent damage. Its fire rate's decent. It's adaptable. I have very little to say. It's just a solid gun all around. So, moving on. Coming number 24, we have the ZAM-72, and that is the LMG variant of the ZA. So, the ZAM-72 is easily the weakest of all the LMGs by far. It's not even close. But this thing still has a few key advantages. That, two of them being ammo, damage, and honestly, for an LMG, its reload speed's actually pretty snappy. Surprisingly, just pop the clip out and just put a new one in. It's actually surprisingly simple. However, its bloom is pretty dicey, and its range is very dicey. This thing is not very practical at anything but close/medium range. It's just not great. But it still hits like a truck, and I think that's why it's so high, because it just hits so ridiculously hard. And its fire rate also is pretty solid, too, to back it up, which makes for a very, very painful DPS that will shred basically anyone that gets close to you. So, moving on. Coming number 23, we have the VSS. So, the VSS, out of all the snipers in this game, is by far the weirdest to me, right? It's a suppressed sniper, yet it does a lot of damage at sometimes, and other times it just doesn't feel like it does anything. This is easily the most inconsistent sniper in the entire game. Like, I never know whether, like, let's just say close range, for example, to start. Sometimes you will rip someone to pieces. Like, I'm talking, like, they're dead fashion to, like the time to kill with a VSS is comparable to that of, like, an F1. It is insanity. However, other times, if you're sniping with it, you have to hit them, like, 8 times. Okay, I shouldn't say that. You have to hit them, like, 3-4 times. And with a sniper with only 10 rounds, that's not great. I mean, sure, it's suppressed, which also really helps, but the only reason why it's this low on the list is just because of lack of consistency. Beyond that, though, when it does hit, it hits hard. So, if you have good aim, this is overall an excellent weapon. Moving on. Coming in number 22, we have probably my most ancient enemy on this list. I'm talking, like, season, 2 to 8 enemy here. H-Bar. H-Bar is in such a weird place these days. It's like a G3 and an AK-74 kind of mushed together, right? It's an AR and a DMR, kinda. It's a weird weapon, I'll say that. However, I can't really deny the stats on it. I mean, it hits hard, it has a competent scope, it works at any distance, it has good magazine size, good DPS. I mean, it's just a really good weapon. The only real issue you could bring with it is its recoil is pretty dicey sometimes, and its bloom is kind of choppy, but those are pretty minor details when compared to a gun that can literally turn from an AR to a sniper in the blink of an eye. So, overall, an excellent gun still. Moving on. Coming in number 21, we have the PHM-82, and some of you might be kind of outraged with the placement of this thing. However, my big issue with the PH is, yes, it hits really, really hard if you hit your shot. The problem is, though, if you don't one-shot them, chances are people are just going to hide and heal. And then this thing, and you hit them again, it's a whole process. It fires really slow. I don't know. Its biggest asset is the fact that it can one-shot people. That is by far its best asset. And it has a really good scope, too, actually. The scope on that thing is probably my favorite in the entire game. But its biggest weakness, like I said, if someone gets close to you, you're probably dead. Medium range, this thing is an absolute killer, and long range, this thing is even more of a killer. It has that crippling weakness of just, if they're close to you, you are probably dead. So, moving on. Coming in number 20, we have the AK-74, and this gun shocked me, actually. This is the gun that, like, picture the ACAM, what all the AKM stands, like, say the AKM is. That is what the AK-74 is. The AK-74 is just an excellent assault rifle all around. And it's not broken. Like, we're still in the territory where the weapon isn't completely overpowered yet. And I think the AK-74 is like the perfect, like it is probably the most balanced weapon in the game by far. It's consistent. It has good damage. It functions really well at close and medium range. It is literally the golden child of assault rifles. I mean, it's the gold standard. Like, I honestly, I don't have much to say about it. Honestly, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but it's an excellent assault rifle, and for those of you who have not tried it in a while, I would highly recommend it. It's a very, very competent weapon. I mean, good range, good damage. I've already stated this already, but it's an excellent weapon, so moving on. Coming in number 19, we have the M21, and honestly, I think the M21 is like the AK-74 of snipers. It's a perfect middle ground between good damage and good range and good fire rate. I mean, it's overall excellent, right? I think it's a 2 to 3 shot kill, give or take, depending on where you hit them in the range. But it fires fast. It functions at any, like, long, medium, short, point blank even. This thing's excellent at all ranges. It's hyper consistent. Its bloom is almost non-existent. Its bullet drop off is pretty solid. It's overall just an excellent not assault rifle. It's an excellent sniper rifle. So, moving on. Coming number 18, we have the SVU. And this gun is basically a more, at least in my mind, it's a more refined version of the VSS. It has the same strengths and weaknesses. However, it's a lot more consistent with its damage. So at longer ranges, this thing more often kills, and at close range, it more often shreds compared to the VSS. Like I said, I have very little to say about it. It's just a VSS, but it's infinitely more consistent. So, moving on. Coming at number 17, we have the ZAM-76. This is the purple sniper that uses Mauser ammo, for those of you who are not familiar with this weapon. And if I had to describe it, it's basically like a different variant of the SVD. It's almost the exact same gun. The only major difference I can think of off the top of my head is the bullet velocity is a little bit different. That's really the only difference. It's very, very similar to the SVD. And it's an excellent sniper. Like, don't get it wrong. Like, this thing functions at hyper long range, medium range. Close range is definitely a bit of a struggle because it fires so dang slow, but it's still it hits ridiculously hard. Like, if you can snipe someone from across the map with this thing. It's pretty nuts. So, if you have competent aim, this gun is absolutely lethal in the right hands. So, moving on. At number 16, we have the SVD, and, I mean, it's basically just, like, the ZA, except, in my opinion, it's a little bit better. And I think I just say that because I'm a lot more comfortable with the SVD. These guns could honestly be used interchangeably, because they serve the exact same role. It honestly just depends on which bullet, because the only difference between the two is the way their bullets arc and the bullet velocity, right? The ZA has a much better bullet velocity than the SVD does, but the SVD has infinitely better bullet, like the bullet drop is way easier to predict. Like, seriously, the ZA, man, if you're firing really far away, it's almost like firing a mortar with this thing, the ZA. It's brutal. This thing, though, it's much more straightforward for most people. And in my mind, I think that puts it above the ZA, but honestly, it's entirely up to your personal opinion, which you prefer. So, at least between these two. So, moving on. Coming at number 15, we have the A1. And honestly, I was pretty hesitant to put it this high. However, it's pretty solid. Like, it is a fantastic rifle all around. I mean, good damage, good range, good scope, good ammo count. I mean, it's just a perfect assault rifle, basically. I mean, I think the A1 is, like, just under the board. It's like, there's good weapons and there's overpowered weapons. And the A1 is firmly in just the good weapon category. It's excellent. The only real weakness of the A1 is its bloom is kind of wacky at times, but this gun is still absolutely excellent in the right hands. So, moving on. Coming in number 14, we have the MGV. Now, I will admit this gun is kind of a meme gun, and a lot of people are going to be like, wait a minute, this gun does absolutely no damage. And you're right, it doesn't do that much damage. However, this is probably by far the best LMG counter in the game right now. I don't even think it's close. I mean, unless you're just you're a crack shot with a sniper, this is, for the average player, this is by far the best LMG counter in the game. And I think that's why it's so high up. Because, sure, it doesn't do a lot of damage, but it fires so absurdly fast that if you're aiming for the head, you are going to hit their face. And it has the fire rate to back it up. Sure, it does no damage, but It fires so many rounds a minute. It is actually insane. It has by far the fastest, at least to my knowledge, it has the fastest fire rate in the game. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm pretty sure that this thing has by far the most fire rate, but I don't know. I know it is a mean gun, but it is still an excellent gun nonetheless. Just simply because if you are in a tight room and this thing is in front of you, you are dead. Unless you are rocking a shotgun or an LMG, and even then it's still kind of a 50-50. You are the big dead. So, moving on. Coming at number 13, we have the Remy. And the Remy, I don't have a lot to say about the Remy. A lot of you are familiar with the Remy. It's just a really good shotgun. I mean, this thing is honestly almost a shotgun sniper. The only reason why it's honestly, I feel like 13 might have actually been too high to put it in retrospect, because shotguns in this game are just really hard to use. However, the Remy, I mean, if you're in a small room with a Remy, if they have even decent aim, you are probably dead. Even if you have an LMG, this thing's just gonna whomp you. This thing is absolutely brutal, and the sound design on this thing is just crispy. And no, that doesn't play into the ranking, but it's still, you know, it's brownie points in my book. So, moving on. Coming at number 12, we have the Spaz or the Lashave or whatever you like to call it. And the only reason why this is above the Remy is, one, it has an extra shell, and two, I find that it's a little bit more consistent on the damage front, at least in terms of, like, close range, they both insta-kill, but at medium range, I feel like there are more Lashave snipes than there are Remy snipes. Both the weapons are very, very similar. However, I think the Lashave just has a slight edge over the Remy. So, moving on. Number 11, we have the RPK, and out of all the rankings in this entire list, this one is probably my most hesitant, because this gun has a lot of flaws. However, I can't really ignore all the things that it's going for, and that being excellent fire rate, excellent damage, excellent range, decent scopes, and it's really easy to get. But I mean, granted, that last one isn't really that important. But the real problem I have with this thing, and the reason why I don't consider it an overpowered gun, is because its bloom is really dicey, and its range is pretty bad for the most part. If you're a laser beam, you can probably do it, but for the average player, trying to win a medium range gunfight with this thing is going to be really, really tough. But most of the time, anyway. But I don't know. I still think it deserves to be this high just because, I mean, it is an LMG, and it's still really, really strong in most situations. So, moving on. Coming at number 10, we have the L85, and honestly, this gun can be boiled down to, it is a laser beam. Literally probably the most deadly, apart from snipers, it is the most deadly accurate automatic weapon in the game. By far. This thing is an absolute laser beam. The bloom, non-existent. Its scope, excellent. Recoil, non-existent. Its damage is okay. Actually, no. It's good damage. It's not the best, mind you, and at close range, that mediocre damage definitely shows. But in medium and long range, even this gun, for an AR, it goes above and beyond what it actually should do. Like, AR should not be this good. This thing is just an excellent package overall. And if you have bad aim, use this thing, because seriously, like, if your crosshairs on them, you're just gonna laser them. It's just an amazing gun. Moving on. Coming at number 9, we have the F1. Okay, so the F1 is, I mean, most people know this gun by reputation. It's nuts. It is insane. It is probably the best assault rifle in the game, by far. It's not even close. Don't get me wrong, the L85 is an excellent laser beam, but this thing is just there's the hammer and there's the scalpel, right? L85 is the scalpel. The F1 is the hammer. This thing will shred anybody, and it can outgun basically anything, not including like the major LMGs. This AR is lethal, and there's a reason why it had to be nerfed multiple times before this thing got under control. So, moving on. Coming in number 8, and this might surprise a lot of you, the PPSH. Now, if I had to describe the PPSH, think of it like the MGV, except a refined version of it, right? Its bloom is a lot better. Its damage is a lot better. The only real problem with this thing, and the only major weakness, is its lack of range. However, this thing is just such an excellent weapon in that close to medium range subset. It's amazing. Like, you are going to outgun a vast majority of people with this thing. Like I said, this is probably going to be the most decisive one on this list, because frankly, there are definitely arguments to place this thing a little lower. However, I think this gun's kind of slept on, relatively speaking. It's just an excellent gun. I mean, there's nothing more to say about it. Moving on. And coming number 7, this one is definitely going to be contentious. Suomi. Suomi is another not LMG, SMG. It's basically the same thing as the PPSH. However, the bloom is even tighter. And the damage, I'd say, is probably a little weaker than the PPSH. However, I mean, the bloom is better. And I think with a gun like this, having better bloom is more important than just having a little more damage and a little more bullets. At least in my opinion, anyway. So, moving on. Moving on to number 6, and this is the part of the list where these guns are just considered overpowered. So this is where the overpowered part of the the list begins. And the first weapon on this list is the PKM. Now, once again, another gun that I honestly, now that I really look at it, I should not have placed the PKM this high. Holy God, this thing should not be this high. Like, I put this thing above the... Okay, I'm kind of starting to regret that decision. We're just going to stick with it. We're going to stick with it. I'm going to try and defend this here. So, first things first. Damage, amazing. Recoil, range, excellent. Fire rate, excellent. I mean, 100 bullets is 100 bullets. You're never going to have to reload with this thing, that's for sure. And it hits like a truck. However, it is a bit slower than the other LMGs, to be fair. However, it's still an LMG. This thing is absolutely nuts. So, moving on. Coming number 5, we have the KK62. And honestly, some of you might have expected this to be like number 2 or number 3. However, the problem with the KK is it is kind of uncontrollable at close range. Even at medium range, this thing is completely uncontrollable. Like, sure, you are probably going to hit him, but this thing just goes everywhere. Like, you fire this thing, and your crosshair is going straight up. Like, this thing is, like, its bloom is hard to control. Its recoil is even harder to control. However, if you do get close enough, I think this gun probably has the best DPS in the entire game. Like, if you're close enough to somebody, they're going to just instantly lose. It doesn't matter what they have. This gun will just rip them to pieces. It's just an auto win, basically, at close range. Moving on. Coming number 3, we have the UK VZ59. And honestly, the only real downside of this LMG is that it only has 50 bullets, but that's still more than the vast majority of every other gun on this list. So, that's not really that much of a critique, because it still has better damage, range, accuracy, and fire rate than 95% of the weapons on this list. But, you know, it has 50 bullets, so that makes it balanced in the Vigor dev's eyes, which it doesn't. So, yeah, moving on. Coming at number 2, we have the M249. And a lot of people are probably surprised that this gun's not number 1. And honestly, I thought about it, but the only thing that holds it back for me is that its recoil, or not recoil, sorry, its bloom is very bloomy. It's not always super accurate. However, you 100 bullets and it hits like a truck. So accuracy usually isn't your concern because, I mean, y'all know the saying, no brain, no aim, use an M249 main. I mean, you don't necessarily need to be accurate in order to get kills in this thing. I mean, you can get a threat with this thing while you're sleeping if you wanted to. But still, I don't think it's number 1. So, moving on. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the MG3, or however the heck you pronounce that thing. I'm just going to call it the Lawnmower of Death. And, okay. So, the Lawnmower of Death is a funny one. Because the only reason why it's above the M249 is its DPS is better. And the fact that its bloom is better. And honestly, it's better than the M249 in almost every single way. The only thing the M249 has is the fact that you could actually, like you can ADS while standing, which is cool and all, but, I mean, I take back what I said about the KK earlier. This gun might actually have the most DPS in the entire game. Straight up, this thing is a menace. Like, the amount of times I'm just doing a challenge video, or I'm running just a competent weapon in the Outlands, and I'm just walking around my own business, and I'm just dead, instantly. Not even time to think about it. Just gone, head removed. Most of the time, that's one of these things. I despise this thing with a passion, and a lot of people don't give this thing enough flack. A lot of people just point to the M249, because to be fair, before the nerf, I'd say it probably would be the best on this list. However, I think the MG3 easily overtakes the M249 in this situation, but I mean, either way, both guns are overpowered. This gun is extremely broken, and it needs to be nerfed. So, yeah. Congrats, everybody, made it to the end of the ranking video, and one more disclaimer I forgot to mention in the intro. So, This was recorded in Season 13. I'm not sure exactly when this video is going to come out. It's either going to be like right on the tail end of Season 13 or right when Season 14 hits. So if there are any major balance changes, which judging by what I've seen in the preview, there aren't really any, but I could be totally wrong. So like I said, this was recorded in Season 13, so if the M4 is not on here, well, you know why. So yeah, with all that being said, though, I hope you guys did enjoy enjoying this, and if you want to see more content like it, please hit the like button, subscribe, do, and then I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.